Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to MyPillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. MyPillow.com, promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. With fuel prices rising so rapidly, interest in the gasoline tax holiday is growing on Capitol Hill following President Trump's endorsement earlier yesterday. But the proposal is also facing some pushback from key Republicans balking at cutting a major source of federal funding. We have an update for you in today's show. A 78-year-old retired pastor has been convicted and fined for preaching a gospel sermon near a hospital in Northern Ireland. We have this story for you as well. Ron Reddy, candidate for governor, joins us a little later in today's show. And South Carolina GOP Chairman Drew McKissick joins me to talk about redistricting and how it will be front and center in these final days of the legislative session. It's a busy breaking news day. Let's get started.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
Every few years in Washington, when gas prices start climbing, we've seen this as a cycle. I've seen it several times in my lifetime. Americans begin feeling the squeeze. Politicians suddenly rediscover something called the gas tax. And now, with gas prices surging again because of the instability in the Middle East, I talked a bit about this yesterday, how I was just floored over the weekend. I hadn't been paying attention. I knew gas was in the $3.60, $3.70 range. I didn't really realize that it had crossed over the $4 range, in the $4.20 range. With gas prices surging like this again, President Trump is floating an idea that is already igniting debate all over Capitol Hill, and that is a temporary federal gas tax holiday. Now, let's be honest. For working Americans trying to fill up their trucks, their cars, their SUVs, to get to work, drive the kids to school, run a small business, the pain at the pump is real. AAA says the national average has climbed above $4.50 per gallon. In some parts of the country, it's much worse. Diesel prices are hammering truckers, farmers, contractors, anybody who depends on transportation to make a living, which is passed on to you and me. President Trump says enough is enough. He told reporters yesterday that suspending the federal gas tax is a great idea. And he says the administration wants to remove it temporarily until prices come back down. Now, here's what we're talking about. To be clear, the federal gas tax is currently 18.4 cents per gallon on gasoline and about 24 cents on diesel. That tax has been in place since the 1990s, and it helps fund the Highway Trust Fund, roads, bridges, infrastructure project, transportation maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So the big question is this. Would suspending that tax actually help Americans? Would it help you? 18.4 cents per gallon on gasoline, 24 cents on diesel. The answer is yes, it will help, probably not dramatically. If you're paying $4.50 a gallon, taking away 18 cents is not going to be life-changing. It's not going to hurt you, though. And let me tell you something. For families already stretched thin by inflation, groceries, insurance costs, housing, energy bills, the list goes on, 18 cents a gallon does matter. Especially if you're driving a gas-guzzling pickup truck like I do at times, especially if you commute long distances, especially if you own a landscaping business or delivery company and you've got multiple vehicles out on the road every day, especially if you're a farmer filling giant diesel tanks every week. The money adds up. And politically, President Trump understands something many in Washington still just haven't gotten it. Americans don't expect perfection right now. They just want somebody trying to help them. That's why this issue has traction, because people feel exhausted. For years now, Americans have been told, just buy an electric car, drive less, lower your expectations, pay more for energy because it's a good policy. That's all we heard during the Joe Biden era. Meanwhile, the people making those arguments often live in cities with taxpayer-funded transit systems and chauffeur-driven security details. They don't have a clue what a gallon of gas costs. The average American doesn't live like that. You and I don't live like that. We live in the surrounding area of the upstate of South Carolina, my area, across the South, Midwest, wherever you might be listening, either on the podcast or on an app somewhere or on the radio. The average American, they drive because they have to drive. Now, politically, this is fascinating because the gas tax holiday has historically been one of those ideas that both parties have thought of before. Back in 2008, both Hillary Clinton and John McCain supported versions of a gas tax holiday. Barack Obama opposed it at the time, arguing oil companies would simply absorb the savings. Then in 2022, Joe Biden himself proposed suspending the federal gas tax when inflation exploded. Congress never acted on it. So suddenly, now you've got Republicans rallying around the idea because President Trump has endorsed it. Senator Josh Hawley says he's introducing legislation. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna says Americans need relief immediately. But here's where the story gets complicated, because not everybody in the Republican Party is on board with this. Some conservatives are a bit skeptical. Why is that? Because they look at it and they say, wait a minute, if we suspend the gas tax, where does the highway funding come from? And it's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate concern. The Highway Trust Fund already faces financial problems long term. Analysts estimate a 5-month suspension could cost somewhere between $17 billion in lost revenue. Those roads that are killing our cars could get worse. Fiscal conservatives hear that number and immediately say, we can't keep adding holes to the budget. Washington has no problem spending billions on foreign aid packages, on climate grants, bureaucratic expansion, programs nobody can even explain clearly to taxpayers. Yet suddenly when Americans ask for relief at the gas pump, the federal government becomes deeply concerned about fiscal responsibility. That argument doesn't land well with the average American, with working people. And I think the White House understands it. I think President Donald Trump understands that. He gets it. Now, let's step back for a second. Let's talk about why gas prices are climbing in the first place. We've talked about this for, almost 2 months now. Much of this surge, of course, is tied directly to the instability surrounding Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. I still don't completely understand that. One of the most important shipping lanes, of course, is for the global oil supply that we're told we're not dependent on. So why is it affecting our gas prices? Still waiting on some of you to tell me, to explain that. The president says once the Iran conflict settles down, prices will drop like a rock. Other people have told me the same thing. Last week, I had Senator Lindsey Graham on. He said that we'll be stunned with how quickly prices will come down. Oil prices, that is. Happened to see Congressman William Timmons yesterday at an event. We had a great time, by the way, at the Get Connected event. A lot of great political organizations there. A lot of candidates there. A lot of elected officials. Representative Paul Wickensheimer, saw him. Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett, Congressman Ralph Norman. The list goes on. A lot of people there. It was a great time. If I saw you there, hope you enjoyed it. But the president says, where I was headed there was I saw Congressman William Timmons, and he pretty much said the same thing, that as soon as we can get out of Iran, these prices are going to plummet quickly. But guess what? We need relief right now. There are families out there who need it right now so they can go on vacation when school's out. Politically, President Trump is trying to position himself as the guy willing to act immediately instead of giving speeches about long-term economic theory. It's critics say a gas holiday is mostly symbolic. Some economists argue consumers won't even feel the full savings because oil companies or retailers could absorb some of the difference. Others say increased demand could actually keep prices elevated. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'm not a specialist with oil. I just know we got to get the price down. Somehow, we got to get this under control because I'm having flashbacks of how we saw prices increase during the COVID eras. They have never gone back down. We can't afford for them to go even higher and never come back down again. You agree? Text me, email me, joey@joeyhudson.com. There's a moment no one wants to talk about with weight loss. It's the moment it stops working. Joey Hudson here. The diet that worked before doesn't. The workouts don't hit the same. Even eating less stops moving the scale. That's not random. That's your body protecting itself. Because when your body thinks it's under stress, it slows your metabolism, holds on to fat, and fights you every step of the way. That's why quick fixes eventually fail. Even the popular GLP-1 shots, they suppress appetite, but they don't fix what caused the problem. At PhD Weight Loss, they focus on restoring your metabolism so your body stops fighting you. That's when the real change happens. And right now, when you call or mention Joey, you're going to get 2 weeks free, and they'll pay for the cost of your food. Just call 864-644-1900. Do it right now and get ready for the summer. That's 864-644-1900 or go to myphdweightloss.com because the goal isn't to lose weight once. It's to never have to start over again. Call today and tell them Joey sent you. We haven't even finished the midterm elections yet. In fact, we haven't even had the primaries yet. And yet, all eyes are on 2028 already. President Trump yesterday described a potential 2028 presidential ticket that includes Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio as a dream team, before cautioning that he's not making an endorsement just yet, he said. Trump joked in the White House Rose Garden after ripping potential Democrat White House hopefuls Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. He said, JD, I envy you. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be JD? Is it going to be somebody else? I don't know, the president continued, before polling the crowd of administration and law enforcement officials on who they like in 2028. Took his own straw poll. He asked, who likes JD? Who likes Marco? Vance appeared to receive slightly more applause than Rubio. Sounds like a good ticket. That was the perfect ticket, the president said. He said, now that does not mean you have my endorsement under any circumstance, but you know it was a big and then a very nice. I think it sounds like a presidential candidate and vice presidential candidate. We'll see. But again, we got to get through the midterms. We got to get these primaries right, and we've got to maintain a majority in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, and in state legislatures around the country, too. Just a horrifying story out of Northern Ireland, where a 78-year-old retired pastor has been convicted and fined for preaching a gospel sermon near a hospital. Now, you might say, well, what does that have to do with us here in the United States? Well, nothing really. It's shocking. It's disappointing. It's sad. But we need to be aware of this because we have to be on our toes to not let something like this happen here in the U.S. Clive Johnston told Fox Digital, naturally, I was deeply saddened by the verdict. At 78 years old, I never imagined I would leave a courtroom with a criminal conviction for preaching the Christian gospel. But beyond the personal impact, my overriding concern is what this says about the state of fundamental freedoms in our nation. Again, this is Northern Ireland. And I would like to say we don't have to worry about this here in the U.S., but honestly, I can't say that. On May 7th, District Judge Peter King, a Coleraine Magistrate Court, convicted Johnston of breaching a safe access zone outside of Causeway Hospital in Coleraine on July 7th of 2 years ago, 2024. Northern Ireland's abortion services prohibits, and it's called the Safe Access Zones Act, prohibits influencing, preventing, or impeding access or causing harassment, alarm, or distress to a protected person within 100 meters, which is about 328 feet, of facilities where abortions are performed. That's what the bottom line is here. This pastor, pro-life, and was preaching the gospel, according to authorities, too close to this abortion center. Johnson was found guilty of influencing inside the protected zone, fined £450, or what is about $614 in American money. He may be the first person prosecuted under the law for preaching a sermon that did not mention abortion, according to the faith-based advocacy group, the Christian Institute, which supported his legal case. Johnson warned that convicting a person for publicly preaching one of the most well-known Bible passages sets a troubling precedent for religious liberty and free speech in the United Kingdom. Look, it sets a terrible precedent anywhere in the world for any Christian to be persecuted like this for preaching the gospel. The pastor said, it effectively redefines peaceful Christian witness as a form of unlawful influence. He said, if simply reading the Bible, praying, and preaching on God's love can now be considered harmful because someone might overhear it within a certain area, then we have crossed a very serious line, and he's right. He asked, John 3:16 is one of the most well-known and hope-filled verses in the Bible, a message about God's love and salvation. If even that can be criminalized because of where it is spoken, then how can any public expression of Christian belief be truly safe with restriction? All good points, all scary. Again, that this could happen anywhere, but you might think, well, this happens in a communist country or a Muslim country. But in the United Kingdom, where Christianity is widely practiced. According to a report from the New York Post, Johnston isn't the only Christian who's been prosecuted under similar buffer zone law. Scottish grandmother Rose Dockery was arrested twice for holding a sign offering conversation in a protected zone before charges were eventually dropped. Others in UK have been charged and fined for silently praying in those same safe zones. Johnson argued the law is too broad, and it puts Christians at risk of government overreach. Look, this is the very reason, these types of things, it's the very reason that these United States of America exist today. Our founding fathers escaped that and came here to build a better country. And that's why we have to fight so hard to keep this country. Body camera footage of the July 2024 incident shows a police officer approaching Pastor Johnston as he preached on the side of a road, warning him that he was in a clearly marked safe access zone and could not film or preach in the area. The officer suggested Johnston go inside the hospital's chaplaincy area if he wanted a safe area to give religious guidance or comfort or help. Johnston is currently considering appealing his conviction. And he should. He should fight this. And organizations over in the UK need to stand behind him and help him. Because if you let this go unnoticed and you don't fight back, they're only going to they're going to start enforcing this even more. They're going to be emboldened. The Christian Institute warned of creeping censorship in the UK. The director of the Christian Institute said if the ruling stands, it will represent a shocking new restriction on freedom of religion and freedom of speech, so we'll be helping Clive to consider the options for the appeal. Northern Ireland's Public Prosecution Service told Fox Digital the defendant was found guilty and convicted by the court of doing an act in a safe access zone with the intent or being reckless as to whether it had the effect of influencing a protected person attending the premises and failing to comply with a direction to leave a safe access zone. We got to fight this kind of stuff, folks. Yes, it was in Northern Ireland, but it could be in the U.S. tomorrow. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Joining me on the guest line, Chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party, Drew McKissick. Welcome in. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning, sir. How are you?
I am wonderful. Looks like we're going to have an interesting week in the State House. The South Carolina House passed a sine die resolution that will allow them to consider moving the June 9th congressional primary to August with potentially new districts. So what's the official party position on this?
Well, our position is we want to maximize whatever's possible. So, the U.S. Supreme Court has given us an opportunity to look at the maps that we have, and not through the eyes anymore of the Voting Rights Act, but, more through the eyes of what is politically possible. Redistricting in general, got to remember fundamentally it's about arithmetic. So our job here is to look at the arithmetic. What does the math tell us is possible? What can we do to maximize our opportunities, but then at the same time not also create a potential future problem? You don't want to get too greedy, and spread your butter over, too thin, over too much bread, so to speak, and potentially create a problem in a future cycle. But at the same time, you want to see if you can maximize your voters in such a way where, we can win. Let's just be blunt about it. That last congressional district here in this state. If we can, and we can reasonably look at the math and believe that we can hold that in what is this year, a midterm cycle. This is not a presidential cycle. So, we can't look at, say, the 2024 math. What were the Trump numbers in 2024? Those are not the right numbers to look at. We need to look at numbers from 22, numbers from 18, in a governor cycle. What's that turnout like, which is about 2/3 of what you see in a presidential race. But also what did it look like from a partisan standpoint? And also keep in mind that, in a cycle after, a midterm cycle after you have won the White House, is typically a little tougher on the party that has the White House. So, keeping that in mind, if we're able to draw lines where we can have, good enough Republican numbers in those districts, keeping that in consideration, then, in my view, absolutely, full speed ahead. Let's see what we can do.
Sure.
And, as you point out, they're going to talk about that this week, but I think it's going to take longer than a week to get all this hashed out.
Well, of course, the next step is the state Senate, of course, has to concur with this.
Right.
There's reports that there may be a few senators who aren't on board. I understand there's been some phone calls from President Trump. I mean, does the Senate ultimately pass this, or all the hoopla from the House this past week saying, "Well, we passed it." Was that their way of positioning themselves to tell the president, "Well, we did our job"?
Well, I think that was accomplishing two things for the House. One, doing what you just said, and two, laying the groundwork, and hopefully we can actually get it done.
Yeah.
Again, I think the answer to your first question, though, what does the Senate do, is going to have a lot to do with what I just described a few minutes ago. They're going to need to see the actual map. Now, I think they need to go ahead and put it in the sine die resolution so they can come back and they can take a diligent, good look at what the numbers would be.
Yeah.
We can't expect, you're going to come out with district lines here in the next 2 or 3 days. They need to go ahead and commit to looking at the process. That will mean probably coming back within a week or two and then laying this out in a way that makes sense, and then go ahead and prove the numbers match up, which I think they will.
Yeah.
But, again, they have to have time to look into it, so that's fine.
Yep. My guest today is Drew McKissick, chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party. So what do you say, Mr. Chairman, to Conway Belagia, the South Carolina Election Commission director, who says this is going to complicate things because of the 6,830 absentee ballots already mailed?
Well, nobody said life was easy, right? I appreciate the position Conway's in, and I would say, welcome to the hot seat, brother. It's his first year on the job here in this, in his new role as director of the Election Commission, and I get it. Things get complicated sometimes. That's politics. Politics has a way of complicating things, but I think in terms of what the House has laid out, as far as making this essentially a separate election cycle from the normal cycle, is the right way to go, 100%. We don't need to delay the House races, the local races around the state, governor's races, the other constitutional races. Let all that stay right on course for June, because you won't have a runoff until the end of June, which means we're putting our victory campaign together basically early July. We don't want to delay that for 2 months.
Yeah.
We need to go ahead and get that in place, and then let this congressional stuff play out in the background into August. But that way we're more prepared for what we need to do to turn out Republican votes here in the fall.
Sure. All of this conversation, of course, has been centered around the fact that James Clyburn is the only black representative in the U.S. House of Representatives from South Carolina in that 6th congressional district. And I forget who it was. Somebody over the weekend that I was watching, there was a Democrat strategist and a Republican strategist being interviewed, and they were all just, the Democrats just talking about, well, it's going to be hard for a black Democrat to be elected. And the Republican strategist said, well, what about a black Republican? Maybe a black Republican. And Senator Tim Scott, he posted on X, I beat Strom Thurmond's son in a majority white district for a seat in Congress, then won statewide in South Carolina, a majority white state. South Carolina elects leaders based on ideas, not identity.
100%. He's exactly right. He is the perfect example of exactly what we've been talking about for a long time. The color of the skin is not what should matter. It's the ideas. Even look down the House of Representatives. Republicans have black female state representative from the Low Country, Harriet Hallman, and she was switched parties a year and a half ago. Got reelected as a Republican. So let's not pretend that Republicans won't vote for African Americans. Just the ideas. What do they represent? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, and Senator Scott also threw in the fact that Carol Campbell's oldest son was in that race too.
He's exactly right.
Yeah. I thought that just ends the whole argument there, because, and it kind of proves the point. They just want to keep focusing on race, and not necessarily the ideas and what the person represents. And so it's going to be quite interesting this week in Columbia. You agree?
100%. And again, look, what Democrats have been all about for decades, we know this, is about division, dividing people up by race or other things other than ideas.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they've done so successfully. It's helped them win races around the country. Thanks to the Supreme Court, though, this tool, if you will, of drawing district lines by race, mandating in many cases they be drawn by race, is going to be in the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Drew McKissick, always a pleasure. Appreciate your time today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. The June 9th primaries are coming up pretty quickly. One candidate who is running for governor is Ron Reddy, and he's with us today on our guest line. Welcome, sir. How are you?
How are you, Jerry? I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, well, I got a feeling that's going to change over these final weeks of the campaign. We got a lot of things coming up. I think you're going to be joining us over at the radio station with our gubernatorial series, and I'm going to be on the panel with the Fox Carolina debate coming up soon. So I'll be stalking you again. How's that?
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I love it. And unlike a lot of the political class, I don't have any restrictions on questions you ask. You can ask whatever you want, and if I don't know the answer, I'll just tell you I don't know instead of making up stuff.
There you go. Yeah. Well, let's start with an issue that's top of mind in Columbia in these final days of the legislative session, and that involves redrawing congressional district lines. Governor McMaster made it clear he would not support a special session, so it's falling to the legislature to make it happen via a sine die resolution. Do you support redrawing South Carolina's congressional districts, and should we do it now?
So I'm gonna answer this in two or three different ways.
Sure.
One, I 100% am opposed to any gerrymandering of any district. I mean, I just think that's wrong. It's unconstitutional. And Joey, as you know, if anyone is a constitutional guy, I am, and I'm opposed to that. That said, I defer from some of these other folks who run around like chickens with their heads cut off involved in process, saying, I start on the back end with result and work backwards. So what is the result you're seeking, or what is the result the president is seeking with the redistricting? The result we're seeking is District 6 should ideally become a Republican district.
Yeah.
And I'm saying if you have a way of achieving that result, great, without introducing a lot of risk. That's how people like me think, right? We're business people. We want to get a result without an undue amount of risk that the whole thing blows up. So here's the problem. When Joe Cunningham lost District 1, we took downtown Charleston and parts of downtown Charleston, part of West Ashley, and we threw it into District 6. When the other guy, Wilson, was threatened in the upstate, we took parts of Columbia, threw it into District 6, because at that time, the legislatures, in their infinite wisdom, said, I want to make sure I protect my other 6 seats, and I am prepared to give up one of these seats to protect the other 6.
Yeah.
Now we want to say, okay, we want to unwind that, and all I'm saying is we've got to do it in a way that achieves a result. And I just saw a map the other day from someone. By the way, there's no map that gives that result. I saw a map the other day that even after this unwinding, District 6 is a 51% maybe Republican district, which means it could go either way. And you know the Democrats are going to get in there and put a bunch of money behind Jim Clyburn and make sure they keep that seat.
Yep.
But here's the other concern. With that map, District 1 becomes a 54% Republican seat, which means in any little blip, you lose District 1. So all I tell people is, listen, I think, by the way, partisan redistricting is allowed. It is constitutional to have partisan redistricting. Yeah. What is not allowed is gerrymandering it based on race. So if partisan redistricting is allowed, I support redistricting to maximize Republican seats. But what I worry about is these people who cannot do anything right. Anything. It doesn't matter if it's Scout Motors or whatever it is. They get everything wrong, jumping into it in the last minute and endangering 2 other Republican districts where if you don't have a very good midterm for Republicans, we could end up at 3 Democratic seats. So I say results first. Unless you can get a result, be careful what you're jumping into.
Yeah.
And that's my position.
Yeah. My guest today is Rom Reddy. His name will be on the ballot in the June 9th Republican primary for governor, you mentioned Scout Motors. I mean, what a boondoggle Scout Motors was, and it's my understanding the South Carolina House this week, in their final version of the budget, they have included another $150 million plus to finish paying for the site work. How would you ensure, as governor, that taxpayer incentives for large companies like this produce measurable returns for the citizens of South Carolina?
Joey, first of all, I have to tell you, it doesn't matter if it's Scout Motors. It doesn't matter if it's a battery plant. It doesn't matter if it's this thing in Silfab over there in Rock Hill that's making these panels with chemicals 1,000 feet from a school that actually is in the middle of land that Ralph Norman owns that he says he knew nothing about. It doesn't matter what it is. These people do not know how to make deals. I've never seen anything like it. You know, I had the last company I ran, we were in all 50 states. And the people you sometimes talk to in these states, certainly the people who are doing this economic development, they tend to be fairly sophisticated people who understand deals. South Carolina is a zero. So let's just take this Scout Motor deal for 1 second. You asked me, what would I do? Well, the first question I'd ask Scout Motors is, hey, you know, you're asking for $1.3 billion. What's the next best deal you have? And I would know the answer to that when I ask the question. I usually like to answer to that. I just want to see if they're honest with me. And they're going to mumble and stumble. And I say, well, my information says the next best deal you have is Mississippi that offered you $150 million. So I don't see why we would offer you $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
How about $155 million?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? That should do it. These people, they don't know. They don't know. And, you know, I love it that Pam Yvette, she says, I'm the business person there. If you're the business person, either McMaster doesn't trust you as the business person and is not bringing into these deals, or he does, which he endorsed you, so I assume he trusts you, and you're terrible. You're one of the worst deal makers known to mankind. Everything they do is broken. And Santee Cooper, where they've packed it with their donors, broken. Ports in Charleston, Savannah is now double our size, packed with the donors again. So the system is broken, Joey. I say this is not man versus woman, black versus white, liberal versus conservative. This is citizen versus a broken system. And the citizen needs to know that as long as this money percolates and the donors and special interests are driving it, South Carolina's 40 out of 50 in donor transparency, nothing is going to change. And I think this is why I say the people that I talk to were the only ones that do these solo rallies. This is the first time in this generation that we have someone like me that takes money from no one and no donors, no nothing. All the money goes away. And I have to go in there and say, I got to reboot the system. It can't be fixed. It's got to be rebooted.
Yeah. What is one regulatory burden you would eliminate in your first year as governor?
Well, there's not one regulatory burden. There's 50% regulatory burdens. As you know, as part of Doge SC, I was the founder of Doge SC.
Yep.
We developed a tool. We developed an AI-based tool that's, Joey, it's awesome. You know, we actually used it. We trialed it on SCDOT and on DSS, on those two regulatory agencies. I have to tell you wonder why the roads are SCDOT. So what this tool does is it says what regulations match the underlying law and what regulations have some connection to the underlying law, but the agencies have expanded its meaning. Well, in SCDOT, it showed 37.1% of the regulations have no connection to the underlying law. So it's basically says, the law says, hey, Joey, go to Lowe's and buy a bicycle. And you go to Lowe's and you buy a bicycle, a bottle of Coke, and a can of something, juice or whatever. Well, the bottle of Coke and a can of juice is you're expanding the authority. But instead of going to Lowe's, you go to Mercedes-Benz and buy a Mercedes. That has no connection to the law. So 37.1% is the Mercedes, no connection to the law. Another 30% is the Lowe's. You bought the Coke and the can of juice that was not part of the law, but you expanded the law saying, well, if you buy a bicycle, you need a Coke to keep you hydrated. This thing has to be torn down, Joey. It's not one regulation. We have 85,000 regulations in this state, 1.8 times the per capita regulation of California. Can you believe that?
Wow.
And they want to debate. I saw Nancy Mace say, oh, no, I want to debate this surfer dude, whatever his name is, Newsom, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, be careful. You probably could lose that debate. You just look at you and say, you got twice the regulations I do. What are you talking about?
Yeah. My guest today is Ram Reddy. He is running for governor in the June 9th Republican primary. Mr. Reddy, South Carolina faces growing energy demands from manufacturing, population growth. What is your plan to keep energy affordable and reliable over the next decade?
Okay, so the first thing we need to do is stop listening to all these political talking points. And they say, in God we trust, everyone else bring data. So I actually, on the back of an envelope, which I'm used to doing this, right? We buy companies, we fix them up, we take it to the next level. So I'm quickly used to, for every 25 companies that I look at, we buy one. So I'm used to looking at these things at a high level. So I looked at our, what we're doing here on the power side. First of all, I will tell you, data centers need to be gone. We do not need data centers here. Mm-hmm. They don't bring jobs. They consume a lot of power, water, and land, and it's a hoax. And all of the stuff we're doing is just money under the table to these guys doing this. So if you take data centers out of the equation, if you say South Carolina came to its senses and said, no more data centers in South Carolina, the power grid is actually somewhat imbalanced, Joey. So I got to tell you, in power, you got to separate power into power generation and power distribution. Now, the distribution side of it, some of the infrastructure needs to be fixed up. We need to spend a little bit of money there. The generation side, without data centers, we're not that far off. And I would say the biggest thing we would need in the short term is some gas power generation. If in fact we need it, that's where I go, and that's the easy way to do it. But the second part of it is we've got to change the model we have. And the model in South Carolina is cost plus. So what that means is, let's say you're running a business and you're spending money like a drunken sailor, right? You spend $1 million when you should have spent $500,000. But I tell you, listen, Joey, you're cost plus. So take the $1 million you spend, add on a profit to that, whatever your profit is, 15%, and then pass that on rates to the consumer, because the consumer can do nothing about it. That's what we got here. We got a cost plus system with no competition. So these guys, they go add some capacity that they may or may not need, and they add their profit onto it, and they put it into the rates. And that's what happened to that nuclear thing. They had donors on Santee Cooper. They spent $10 billion of our money before they said, oops, that's not going to work. Did anyone get fired in Santee Cooper? No. Did the board get a discipline? No. What happened? They took that $10 billion and said, oh, yeah, we made a mistake, so just put it into the rates and recover it from the citizens.
And that's just crazy. Talk about the poster child of a government boondoggle. To spend almost $10 billion, and you've never produced a single megawatt of electricity. And how do you spend that much money, and someone along the way doesn't say, well, something's not working right here?
Yeah, I mean, in the business side, you talk about fiduciary responsibility, duty, and this would fall dead center into negligence.
Yeah.
Why is no one pay the price? Because the Santee Cooper board is filled with donors. So when people like me govern, we put people there who know something about power, right? We don't put donors, but first of all, I don't have any donors. But this is the difference between what we're doing, Joey. It's a big problem. Look at all these people. You were there at the debate. Look at all the people on stage. We got senator, congressman, congresswoman, AG, LG, all part of government. And these folks, I saw Mace there on the stage saying, I submitted 65 bills, the second largest order. How many become law? None. Zero. And so this is the difference between these people who are used to making laws and all the narrative and governing.
Yeah.
Governing is about results. If I had 65 at-bats at the plate, I would need to get 50 hits or I'd sink the company. So what we've been doing in South Carolina is we've been putting these people who have the wrong skill set into governing and saying, get results. And they don't know how to get results. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's not that they're just lying to you about, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
They've never done it.
Yeah.
And therein lies the problem. But this whole power thing can easily be solved. We have to look at it a little bit differently. But I honestly think if you take our data centers, we're not as far off as you think.
Yeah. This is your first political campaign. Why now?
This is a good point. I never, ever wanted to be in politics. I didn't want to be in politics this time around. As you know, I was running Doja C, and I had no interest in it, or I would have gotten in when they all got in 9 months ago. What happened is I thought someone from the outside I knew the people in the system will never fix the system. They take all this dark money. South Carolina does not require these PACs to say who donated to the PACs. So when people go and vote for someone, they have no idea who bought and paid for them. So I said, we got to get someone from the outside running to do the things that we want to do to make sure we can get the state on the right path. Someone told me Warren or someone maybe would run. And then I looked around, we get to registration. No one is running except 5 people who have been in government for a combined 53 years. And I turned to Renee and said, Renee, this will be a disaster for this state. And this state has so much potential. There are so many things to be fixed. These people will never fix it. They're victims of their donors and the ruling and the rulers. And she said, we got a child in freshman in high school. Is this something you want to do? I said, it's not something I want to do. But I want to tell you something, that our founding fathers, when they actually wrote the Declaration only 250 years ago, they said, for the support of this declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And they were prepared to sacrifice that for the principles of the Declaration, which simply says, our rights come from God, and government's job is to protect those rights, not to take that power and rule over us. And I said, no one is going to do that. If we want to really change this on the anniversary of 250th, none of the people in office are going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why I got in. I mean, if you ask me, if you ask Renee, 6 months ago whether I had any desire to run for office, no. And people say, well, are you buying the office, because you're rich, you're not taking any money? I said, the opposite. For the first time in our generation, I'm trying to keep the office from being bought.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. These offices are bought and paid for, and you don't even know it when you vote. I said, I'm trying to keep this office from being bought. What would I buy? I don't have any business interests in the state. I've sold the last business I had in 2023. I said I wouldn't even take a salary. What would I buy for myself? Nothing other than get my 15-year-old upset that I'm asking her to move schools.
Yeah.
But this is we got to take the money out of the system, Joey. We can't win this game.
One final question for you. What has surprised you most while being out on the campaign trail?
Well, what has really surprised me is that after so many years, you would think that the politicians wouldn't be so tone deaf and realize that people are cynical. They're cynical of what people, they're cynical of things I say sometimes, and I'm not even in politics, never been in politics, never run for office, right? And people are cynical, but they still keep feeding them all this BS. You know, I just hear them on the trail. I see them on these campaign things, and Norman says, I'm not a career politician. Dude, you've been there for 10 terms, 21 years. So what's a career politician?
Mm-hmm.
Then term limits. Why don't you tell people term limits takes 2/3 of the vote from the House and the Senate, the same people you're calling, you're calling corrupt. And then you got Pam saying she's going to cut the taxes in 100 days. So why didn't you do that? You've been in office for 8 years. All these people promising. Nancy has never governed. Does anyone know that? She has never, ever governed anything, period. And we're going to give her the keys to governing $40 billion. I mean, that's like, just think of people who are running their companies. And Alan, he's actually a nice guy. I know Alan. I've known him for a while, but I told Alan this, and this is nothing I haven't told him. I said, Alan, you've been the state lawyer for 15 years. So if a company is in trouble, would you ever go and say to your lawyer, would you please run the company? You don't know how to govern.
Yeah.
You got to punch your ticket in governing. Be a lieutenant governor for 4 years, and then you'll be a great governor. You try to get into a governor's mansion and govern, having been a lawyer your whole life. How is that going to be good for the state? So why are people not just saying this directly to the public and earning their trust? Because the public doesn't trust politicians. And that surprises me that these politicians are so tone deaf. The last thing I'll say is I hate that we put these politicians on a pedestal. The thing that gets me most uncomfortable when I go to these rallies and stuff, people want to take a picture with you, do this. I'm like, I'm a nobody. I work for you. Why do you elevate me and put me on a pedestal? And this is what happens with these people. We put them on a pedestal and they become arrogant and they stop listening to people.
Yeah.
And I hope we can change, Joey. If nothing else, I hope a generation of people can be motivated to say, we've got to go back to what our founders gave us 250 years ago. We've run away from it. We've got to walk back to it.
Yep. Ram Reddy, you can see his name on the ballot June 9th. For additional information, check him out online, readyforgovernor.com, readyforgovernor.com. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate it.
That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.